Hello and welcome to another modelling video. This is Alan from the Modelling Man at YouTube with another honing your airbrush skills video. And as promised for a little while, I am actually reviewing an airbrush, and this is one that I bought before I went overseas on my overseas trip. Went on eBay, and as I've talked about, the DH103 framed really cheap airbrushes are perfectly okay for little modifications, a little work. They could be used to airbrush. I've given them away in past competitions. I've recommended a lot of people to buy them, and they work a treat. This airbrush is a completely different model. Now, I don't remember what the actual number or coding of the airbrush is. It is a 0.3mm airbrush. And instead of like the DH103 model, which it's almost identical except for the paint cup, having the welded in cup, we've got the removable cup, and we've got this very large container. Now I'm thinking of using this as my primer only model. I want to test out how strong the plastic is, and that if the airbrush is pretty much the same as my others. Besides that, the external appearance looks the same. We have also got an even larger bottle with a threaded bit and a air coupling for people that uses these plug-in types, which I won't even be using. I'm using this wrench, and I've also bought off eBay a 0.5mm crown and nozzle and a 0.5 needle, and this is a little bigger than the 0.3, and I reckon it should airbrush primers a little easier, a little less maintenance. I could be a little less sloppy, a little more sloppy and lazy, but still doing everything properly because I won't pull the trigger all the way back and waste a lot of primer through overspray. Though when I'm priming a model, I can have the cup almost full. I have a slightly larger nozzle. It should be a tad easier. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull the whole thing apart, and then we'll swap some parts out with these. And being 0.3, which I chose that on purpose, that can go in my general stock of airbrush maintenance goods. So the first thing I've noticed pulling apart and maintaining and cleaning, I don't know how this will react in an ultrasonic cleaner, but being as big as it is, all you probably have to do is wipe it out. And then we've got the rest of the airbrush. It feels a bit loose on the thread. A little bit of petroleum jelly will fix that. And so far everything looks the same. Just want to compare the size of the needle to make sure that I'm in no danger, and they are the same length, though I could see the temper of the needle is a bit different, and all of this is actually out of a camera shot. You'd actually notice visually that the tip of this is quite thicker than the tip of this. So I'll put this aside, not to confuse them. Also feel, being a thicker needle and a thicker nozzle, there is a chance that damage won't occur as frequently. I do apologise for the sounds of my 3D printer. Many things are a go in the studio at any one time. So we're removing the internals. Straight away, the parts are slightly different to the DH103. Ooh, that is, I've never seen anything like that, so I can actually safely say that this is a completely different model of airbrush, and this is actually probably closer to the Delta line of airbrushes because they've got that terrible air trigger. Again, all of this is an experiment. The air coupling is way too tight. I'm going to have to remove that with pliers. So that's removed, and all we have to do is take off the tip. good to see that at least the needle and the nozzle's the same. Very happy I get to replace that. So far, mechanically, the internals of this airbrush is quite fine. I cannot see myself having any problems operating it. This is actually the first time I'm opening this little set, so let's have a look. Got a nozzle with the actual washer and this new crown. The two crowns are a bit different. I can tell that straight away by the sides of the opening. Probably would not hurt if I did have a spare crown. Though if you did use the same crown, I can't see how that would do your airbrush much damage. And just hang on for 1 second. I want to be very careful not to use the incorrect nozzle and needle. I've had a friend that just bought a different needle, a completely inappropriate needle for his airbrush, and put it through the nozzle, split the nozzle immediately, and it created him all sorts of heartaches. So straight off the bat, I'm going to see for the first time and on camera how easy it is to assemble, which will give people an idea if this is an appropriate product to buy or not. Straight off the bat, the tongue and the trigger is a bit tricky, but nothing impossible. It's a very quick airbrush to assemble and disassemble. Again, having experience and owning for a short period of time a Delta 0.3 style airbrush, which has slightly different internals to the standard model Sparmax one. It's not too bad. I've got all the internals in place. I'm going to slide the needle through, and we'll probably, beautiful, all that's working. Put the new needle through. I've never airbrushed with a 0.5 before, so it'll be very interesting to see the spray patterns. Slid through perfectly. And I am very happy with that. The first time I use it, I won't put any lubricant through it. Once it has its very first clean out, we'll do that. So far, the modification went ahead, no problem. It's got a new crown, new nozzle, new needle. The thread works, so there is no reason why it can't work. If you're buying the Delta pattern or DH103 pattern airbrushes, the nozzles is completely universal, so if you like spraying of a certain spray pattern, it doesn't matter what airbrush you buy, you can buy the appropriate nozzles and needles for what you want to do. And for those people that are envious of some of the more expensive brands of quick change nozzles and needles, for a little extra time you can actually swap between nozzles and needles with these cheaper models and get a very similar result on spending a lot less coin. And again, as always, practicing drawing your lines and whatnot, you'll get the same results as your brothers who spends $50 to $100 for parts and well over $300 for their airbrushes. There is no need to stick your nose up at cheaper alternatives, but the proof in the pudding will be in the next segment when I start airbrushing with it. Okay, so I've got the airbrush fully loaded. I've got about 2-part thinner to 1-part primer. A tiny bit of retardant's been sprayed in for good measure, and because of this awesome pot, I've got about 2 to 2.5 times more primer in here than I usually need. Now I normally have to fill my primer airbrush about 2 to 3 times for a high grade, and hopefully I can do all this in one pass for convenience. So I've got the compressor at about a little high, about 15 psi. It's leaking, which is a pain in my ass, and let's see how it goes. Oh, I don't like that. It's very spluttery. There we go, it's improving a bit. Came out a bit spluttery at first, don't know, because it's the first time I've used this airbrush. Being primer, find something else to test on. Finally got it figured out. It's a little higher PSI, it's quite thin. I've got like a sandwich box. And I can get fairly clean, tight, and nice lines. That is as thin as the lines get. Ideal. It's flowing very nice. I'm not getting this textured, rubbished airbrushing effect. The paint at 2-part primer to 1-part, sorry, 2-part thinner to 1-part primer comes out very, very nicely. We'll get some parts out, we'll colour them in, we'll see how we go. Now, what's really tempting is it's very easy to go overboard, use way too much primer, spray back too much air and just flood a surface, especially if it's a large area. Small tight control is the best, and we're going to paint a small piece. We'll zoom in, of course. It's orange peeled a bit. I don't know if this because there's some sort of coating or if it's drying in the air. I'll probably sand that piece, but we'll try again. It's going to take some figuring out. Again, first time using it, not 100% happy. There's a bit of a drip of primer appearing on the tip of the needle, so wish I'd forgotten. I need to just spray initially, put the part in front, start spraying. We'll do one more piece and we'll see if we can get it flat down. I'll use it a little longer. I'll give a point of view. That's a lot better. I'm quite happy with that. You can actually almost get everything done in 2 passes and quite tight. There is a bit of overspray. I think it's something I need to practice with more. Okay, so what I've learnt is it is very hard to control. You need to spray before you go over the model. I think it sort of dotted on the paint. The paint didn't end up being sandy or any sort of orange peel texture. Everything dried smooth. Very happy about that. 2 notes. If it does jam, take the top off before you do the bubble jet. I did the bubble jet, it exploded, paint went everywhere. I also took the needle out to unclog, and it just squirted a jet like a water pistol of paint right at my jar. Luckily my model was not in the way, so again, take the lid off. There's no hole or lid, creates a vacuum, a lot of pressure, causes little problems. I'm thinking about drilling a hole and seeing what happens, but overall it puts a lot of paint out. It's probably good for large models, good for dioramas. In the way of small bits like this high grade that I'm spraying, not ideal. I think I'll save my high grades and fine models to prime with a normal airbrush for large dioramas, large models. When I was painting my Gunpowder Builders World Cup diorama, I think this will be perfect. So I'll probably shelve it, and the rest of the video will be about my normal airbrush. After the demonstration of that airbrush and primering, may as well share some work that I'm currently mucking around with. This is a part of the high grade Barbaros. So we've got the main torso here that I'm painting all in one piece. It started by being primed, painted gloss black, shaded gunmetal, and then from the top of the shoulders down, so the whole light effect, I got silver, painted the very top of it solid, and then shaded down to the midpoint, blending in with the gunmetal, and from the bottom of the fists up black to darken that area. And for maximum effect and to make it look interesting, to pick up eyes, hand painting does always come into play. I coloured in the pistons silver, and some of the pipe work this interesting copper colour that I have. The same thing, nothing different with the legs. You can see that it appears to be lighter from the top, darker at the bottom. That's not the lighting in the room or by accident, it's as effect. And the pipe work just breaks it up and draws the eyes into all sorts of different interesting locations. Now the backpack has a main thruster, and I thought, you know, there'd be soot and rust and all sorts of stuff. So same thing happens with the thruster. The thruster was darkened, and there was a bit of gunmetal and actual non-metallic brown mixed into it to have a dirtied burnt metal effect without actually using any burnt iron or burnt metal coloured paints. Blending them together can be a lot of fun. I've got mobile worker on the go. I'll talk about this yellow to orange stuff later. A lot of people have been harping on Facebook about future floor polish. I've got some silver, and I sprayed 2 colours or 2 coats of future floor acrylic, and it's looking very shiny, very beautiful, nicely executed reflective finish. From the naked eye that I could see here, it is ever so slightly patchy. Future's like that, super thin, 3 to 4 coats and it will be solidly gloss sheen. But since this is an in-between intermediate thing before the whole thing is assembled and going to be glossed, where this is right now, I'm extremely happy with. So it isn't a rubbish finish or a rubbish product. A lot of people still use it just because there is a trend at the moment. Doesn't mean that it should be rubbished. This took a lot of work. It's its unusual mace hammer. I did a bit of pre and post shading, going from gunmetal till silver. In the top you can see the lines and you can see it's quite silver. When I showed the side, it's a little darker, and you can see that the top bit here has been painted and shadowed black, and the sides are right, but it's a bit darker from here. This is because I got an airbrush, loaded it with black paint, pulled it really far away and just dusted a tiny bit of black across here, here nothing, that's a pure colour, and in the bottom I just kept shading black until you can almost see nothing, but there is still the slightest bit of silver. So when the Gundam is holding it like that or like that, the shading of the lighting is somewhat believable. I mentioned in the video, you know, these effects are natural light shading. Someone said it's rubbish, it looks like fucking garbage, it's just a fake weathering effect. Whatever, I like the look of it. It's something that I'm ongoing practicing and experimenting, but it doesn't matter as long as it's the achievements that you're after. Now what I've got here is the majority of the external armour. This has been achieved by darkening the very parts that are going to be the bottom lower areas, and then shading from orange, yellow to a cream to achieve a interesting shaded yellow effect. It is a bit dramatic, it is a bit overdoing it. This is targeted to be a more of a fantasy stylized model than a realistic gritty military piece. And what I plan on doing is this whole Airbrush is going to be the colour scheme of a German mercenary Landsknecht during the Renaissance period. It's those guys with very frilly, baggy clothing that's got multiple coloured cloth with helmets and metallic chest-pieced armour. So that's what this model kit screamed at me, and I just fell in love with the idea, and that's what I'm going for. Same shading effects generally. These parts took which is 2 trays worth, about 2 hours to achieve. Really happy. I'm going to run masking tape all down the length of each piece to make it half exposed, half masked, to do a red effect. It's going to be quite interesting. I'll show some of the masking off and see how we go. I'm going to do a very basic piece as we go. So we're going to cover this half. Got Tamiya tape. Tamiya tape's always the best. I've talked about masking in the past, and I'm going to keep mentioning it's got low tack. It doesn't lift up the paint. This paint has been painted about a week ago with the top coat, or probably closer to 5 days. Going for a very crisp edge, so I'm going to cut everything with scissors, no tearing. And I'm going to apply just a heap of small pieces instead of one big piece. That way that there won't be any detail lift or a loose bit of tape up that's going to allow paint to go across it. So just apply it down. I haven't touched it underneath of the part. And just place it roughly where I think it's half is there. And then I just fold over. I'm going to apply all the tape on it and show you what it looks like. We're just going to be all those squares all over the place just to cover exactly half. And there we go, those 3 pieces, and it's just covering everything. It's been pushed down. Again, when I'm going to be airbrushing, it's going to be lowest PSI, very thin paint, and it's just going to be ever so gently airbrushed on with the piece tilted so the airbrush is going in this direction, not that direction, thus lowering the risk of bleeding of paint going underneath the tape. I'm going to put on paint so thin that it literally dries just before it hits the surface instead of just hitting on very thickly, and thus sitting there in a liquid state and having the risk of seeping under. Masking is always a risk. There's always the risk of failure. Mucking up with the amount of work I put in the shading, there is a lot of risk. There is a little stress on my shoulders. Though as experienced as I am, I'm going to run with the punches, see how I go, especially with the time limits that I'm on. Though I could do things to lower risks, and that is apply paint, allowing a week to dry, putting in lots of tape, mentioning the direction of the airbrush, how thin the paint's going, all that sort of stuff will control it. When I remove the paint and I'm scratching it off, I'm going to pick at the part where the tape's overlapping the tape, and then the rest of it will be picking at the back where if paint is chipped or wrecked at the back, that doesn't matter as much. And once all the tape is off, a clear coat to protect everything. There is a clear coat on top of this yellow. I'm going to apply the red. It's going to have a clear coat on top of that. Everything will be removed. Another clear coat. Absolutely clear coat mad when you do masking and modeling. These might have been mentioned before in the past. I'm more than happy to do it multiple times as it's just generally helpful.
When he comes to town, he will be sponsoring it. I'm not sure it's actually playing yet. I think it opens, and then what happens? You just walk away and leave the trolley.
I probably forgot to mention, when applying your tape, this is done in one piece instead of multiple. You can see that it contours very well right on that edge. The reason why, and I'll swap hands, is with your finger and fingernail rubbing along the tape, push the tape down as flat as you can, and with your nail just rub it and work it to contour into panels and panel lines. And again, when paint is being applied to it and you're spraying in this direction, not that one, you're not getting paint underneath the masking tape, and you're applying it quite thinly. This just lessens your risk of making mistakes and for the mask to fail. So just massaging and pushing down on the tape once applied and just rubbing it really does make a difference. And here's it all done. Took a little while. Spray them up and we'll see what happens. Fuck. And the selection or colour of shaded paints. As a result, all the mask pieces are painted and all the other pieces are hand painted. And just as a closer example, you can see that there's a difference between the yellow and the red, the crisp line in the middle, and you can't see any obvious mistakes of paints being lifted or bleeding or anything. One or two pieces may have tiny blemishes. They've been touched up from a distance. Don't look bad at all. They come all shaded and whatnot. So yeah, pretty happy how these came out. Be ready for assembly and final touch-ups. With the Barbaros done, I'm going back to the high mark, which I mentioned a few videos ago, and we polished it, primed it, top coated, sanded and polished again, so it is super shiny with just a single gloss coat. What I'm going to do is give everything a gloss black coat, colour it in its respective nail polishes, clear coat it heaps, sand polish, sand polish, sand polish, clear coat polish type thing. Let's see how we go. The black paint I'm deciding to use is Alclad gloss black. I don't use it all the time. It dries very flat sometimes, and I'm just doing a generic black. It's just Mr. Hobby with gloss coat. Since I'm heavily going into the whole polishing super sheen gloss, I'm going to stick to that. Besides it being quite big and almost pre-mixed, a few drops of thinner does go a long way. It dries really slowly, so if there's any fault, mistakes, textures, whatever, it is very likely that it's going to self-level. Can get a bit funny and thick, so give it a really good shake, a really good stir, and out of all seriousness, a few drops of thinner, even though it's pre-mixed, really goes a long way. So we'll demonstrate the use of it and we'll see how we go. Paint this piece. Zoom her in. Now the cool thing about this stuff is it goes on quite transparent. It's not that thick. As you can see, it's going on a bit grainy. It's a bit or splotchy or dusty. And just a reminder, you know, you do things in coats, very blotchy, not very nice. And just slowly build up, and that just prevents weird textures, prevents mistakes, builds up, runs, paint flaws, paint faults, whole kit and caboodle. I just sit there, let it wait, let it harden, let it, you know, dry up after 20-30 seconds, and just another layer and another layer and another layer. And I just hope dust and hair and crap doesn't get trapped on it. And you can see this shit is really glossy, but I can immediately see there's a few speckles of dust, there's a hair, there's a couple of imperfections. So after all the painting and the clear coat, is going to be a lot of final sanding, a lot of polishing to get that final flat look. But at the moment, that is one wicked, very glass sheen. I could see the reflection, which is directly coming from my light. Instead of being all frosted, it's just a tiny dot of clear light. It doesn't frost, it doesn't stretch out. That's pretty much the look of the glass mirror finish. And just looking into it, I can actually see the reflection of my airbrush and hands in the actual paintwork. So this polishing business is pretty good, and I'm very excited to see what the final result is when it's all said and done. But yeah, a few more coats, and yeah, she's good for the next step. Now the worst thing about this paint is I literally only painted 2 items. Airbrush is completely clogged, so I'm going to run thinner through it and just see if there's anything in the nozzle or whatever. Reload it up and see if I can keep painting. If not, I'm just going to swap to another paint. Alclad's not normally my first choice. Lovely finish, but is it worth the hassle? Alright, there was a bit of crap in the airbrush, though at the same time, instead of using it straight out of the bottle, I've had it for a couple of years. I've thinned it 50-50, and we'll try again. And there we go, that's applying a lot nicer. We'll zoom in a bit. So you always got to be careful with these so-called pre-mixed paints, because sometimes they're just not that pre-mixed. You see, it sort of just struggled there for a bit and then just spat out a heap of paint. It's just a really temperamental brand of paint, and it's just got a way of just collecting crap and encrusting it under the surface. Though we'll just keep applying coats, and hopefully it will behave like that. So I sprayed all the pieces, and they're quite separated. The reason why is they've been painted a few hours ago and they are still sticky. I didn't actually touch the model, I touched another surface that got overspray, and it has not dried or hardened yet. And this is ideal that it's solid enough that I could paint on top of it, but it takes a very long time to harden because it just adheres very well to the top layer of paint, and for some reason just achieves a longer sheen gloss. Now what I'm going to do is separate all these, and I'm going to paint them with these pretty interesting nail polishes and some washes and inks and whatnot. Let's see how we go. So I've added this nail polish. It is acetone based, mixes with lacquer perfectly fine. Did a test piece. A little more than 50-50. It's a high glitter paint. It's really hard to control. You can't really get a fine line, but the higher PSI, it just colours in just fine, and we shall colour in a piece. You got glitter going everywhere. You really, with the glitter paint, you really just need to blast it on. And there you go, it's nice and, well, glittery. And there you go. I'm going to have to put a few clears, and I might have to shade it with other paints. See how we go. And this is the finished result of the nail polish. Looks really cool. It's got this speckle glitter textured look. It's really interesting. I can't wait to get a lot of clear coats on it and polish it so it don't affect the pigment, and see what it gets. The speckles are just very interesting. Again, just blasted at a high PSI. Large particle metallics is a bit of a pain, but this just glided really smoothly with enough thinner. It is a very thick nail polish, so really happy. Time to try the green, and we'll have a look at what that looks like. There This is the green. That is a really cool paint. Can't wait. It's pearlescent, it's metallic, it's sexy. Now unfortunately the green actually looks quite crap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint everything silver, and then I'll put the green on top and hope for an improvement. That is the risk you do play with nail polish. Now with how dark and beautiful that is, it's just really light. It's transparent on the silver. Not that happy, but I still like the glitter, so I'm going to be painting all the pieces that, and then we'll use some clear green and just darken it up a bit, so a candy coat for the win. So I used Armoured Glass by Outclad Candy Coat. It looks pretty interesting. Gonna let it harden, put a clear coat, polish it, and then start clear coating and sanding and polishing and doing that process. And this is the silver. This piece is painted with Outclad. That is speckled silver, so you can see the difference. And after I give everything a bit of a sand polish, I'm also going to do some shading with black nail polish. So we'll see how all that goes. So my parts are pretty green. We've got that. We'll zoom in. So this is a heavy coat of green, as previously shown in the last video, on top of silver. And just so my models are not flat, I shade them. I've been looking on the picture of the model kit, and I've been going from the bottom part dark to green. And I'm not using paint for that. I've also picked up in my collection of nail polishes for this video the black one, non-metallic. The other ones have been painted with metallic, and it's been applying a lot more smoother. Now I've had a few questions online showing my work in progresses of the nail polishes. Just as easy to paint. All you do is add automotive lacquer or paint lacquer. Very easy. The stuff with the metallics, particularly the chunky ones or the glitter ones, can be a bit tough. You just put them at a high PSI, explained with the green and the silver, and they blast on. You can't really shade or colour in. But with the solid coloured ones, there is no problem whatsoever with control. You see, I can do really fine lines. It's a little overly thin. Reason for that is so I can darken the edges. Can you see that? So I can darken the edges. Yeah, it's still slightly transparent, and then I can pull back and just colour it in and shade it from dark bottom, light top. Not the most realistic approach in the world, but it just gives it a bit of definition, a bit of interest, a bit of shadowing, and it just breaks up my models from the rest of the crowd that's just generally coloured in. And it works lovely with metallics. This is a high gloss nail polish. And going on really thin, I just have ultimate control of how much I want to put on or not put on. And I could just do this for ages until I'm fairly happy, and that's about the intensity I am after. I'm pretty pleased with that, which is identical with the others. And that pretty much concludes the nail polish. You just got to make sure, and explained in the past couple of other videos, they need to go on a primed surface or a painted surface. You need to seal them as soon as possible. Some of the cheaper acetone based nail polishes have a tendency of chipping or flaking off, especially when touched, especially the glittery ones, and they just need a top coat on top. A couple of days, not a problem, but talking to some women, my mother, whatnot, just touching them constantly makes them fall off. But all in all, it's a lovely green. Pity that they weren't the correct colours. I did have to add clear candies to them, so that's already sealed, but it looks pretty good. Now I just want to talk about these pieces. You've seen them before. I painted them with this glittery nail polish. It's a bit light for what I was going for, so I significantly darkened them using Outclad smoke. They come out slightly purple, but I really like the look of it. It's purple, it's really glittery, it's got a texture, a few clear coats, panel line, more clear coats. I think it's going to come out quite nicely according to the box art, or at least in the spirit of the box art. So even if they're the right colour, the right texture, but not the right shade, you can either get something like this, thin it down heaps, and you saw in my video you just slowly dust it on like a filter and just slightly change the tone instead of just the edges. Or you can put a clear paint over it, that's lacquer. Looks alright, it's very shiny, it's got the glitter texture to it, it's an interesting effect that will not be seen in another high mock. I'm going to do heavy shading on the edges as well. Do a quick product review, and I'm painting some tanks in between other things. I got my Bradley, and it's been primed with Guy Notes Surface Evo oxidized red. This is generally the colour or primer that's under real life tanks, so I'm using that for a lot of my 72nd armour, and that's been sprayed. Now the Bradleys are all desert yellow, or a dark yellow, and I bought this set by Mr. Hobby in Japan. And what it does is it comes with an undercoat and your dark yellow and a few choices of highlights. Now, this is normally used for a much larger model, but we can do a test and we'll see what it contains. Gives you theories about shading and whatnot. You colour it in the normal colour and you shade the bottom or the top, or you can paint it dark first and then highlight it up a bit. Crack her open and see what we have. So it's a colour modulation set, and I suppose besides brown there's other colours. I might actually look into getting a Soviet version and whatnot. And they all kind of the same from the top of the lid, but the labels tell you what they actually are, and we'll find out if it's synthetic or normal. It's probably going to be synthetic, so it's quite thick, and I have to give them a bit of a good shake. Yep, we'll apply it 50-50. There we go. You can see the range of colours. We'll start with the really dark brown, and then we'll chuck on the dark yellow, and then just add a bit of a highlight and see how we go just by colouring the tank in. Before we get any further, it comes with some instructions. So it sprays first with the dark yellow, and it does all of its highlights, and you just shade the top bits and do masking and whatnot, and then you go for dark last. I normally go dark to light, and that's just what I prefer, but it's an interesting method and it's something I may try. They probably talk about the direction that you paint and how fine you do lines and whatnot, but it seems very interesting. I love the colour tones. I really love, you know, the bit of a theory and paperwork they go through. Very handy in a set like this. So I just want to mention that the paint is not synthetic, it's normal lacquer, normal thinning rules apply, and comparing to a standard, I think it's a 10mm, doesn't matter, standard size of paint, you pretty much get double the amounts in these sets. So even though you're looking for 20 bucks for a whole set, you're given a ton of paint. So testing out the paint, got it loaded up, 50-50, no retardant. I love that colour. I love the flow, nice, smooth, fairly mattish, excellent colour. I think these are going to shade beautifully. Now the important thing when the first time you're doing this, there's a lot of undercarriage and wheel wells and whatnot. This is the first coat, the undercoat, the shadow coat. So a lot of like under the wheel wells, the reactive armour, you want to make sure you get all those areas. The wheels are normally quite tricky if you have the tracks glued on, and you want to get both directions and get right underneath the wheel wells. So when you're spraying the lighter colours, you're going directly on top and the highlights just partially, and you can see how it's getting from that dark yellow to a light yellow. And I'm going to spray underneath and the other side of the wheel wells and whatnot. And I'll show you what it looks like when we're just only doing the undersides. So here we go, you can see that there's only small patches of paint all over the place, and that's under areas like the turret, hook detail. It doesn't normally happen like that with a lot of armour. Here's a World War II concept tank I'm working on. You can see that you'll only have to paint under the barrel, around the wheels and underneath. Modern tanks are a bit more complicated. I don't do a lot of them, and you can see that the underside is completely painted, all in the wheel wells, underneath the reactive armour, the barrel, around the turret, and some hard to reach detail areas. And the rest of it's fairly brown, just so I can handle it for my hands. This lacquer is drying quite quickly, so I'm just going to sit it down. I'm going to dust on a heap of paint, colour it in, go from multiple angles to make sure that every bit of detail is seen. I'm going to lift it to the reason why it's on a bit of a bar, and just look at every angle and spray at every point so that none of it is missing. And you just simply dust on very light, and that way you're just getting every angle, every detail, and you're not going to miss anything. It's because we're doing the shadow coat, so we want everything coloured in. Go a bit thicker on areas that you think you're not quite going to spray later. And you just keep going nice and hard. I've got that half completely almost coloured in. Going this way, that way, every way. Probably should stop talking, but you get the idea. When it's all coloured in, you lift it up, you look around, and you just keep getting areas that you've forgotten. And here we go, it's all done. It's looking pretty good. I'm actually quite impressed. The next coat, which is the dark yellow, we're only going to be applying paint as the model is on the ground. I'm not lifting, I'm not painting underneath anything. And I'll be painting on a 45-degree angle and just dusting on in concentrated places, hoping that a lot of shadow areas like under the reactive armour, around the wheel wells, is going to remain dark. And then we'll get the lighter one and just paint exactly directly bird eye view up, and that should capture some interesting detail. Very easy, not really rocket science, not really technical hand painting like some of the other shading videos I do on my Gundams, where it's like heavily black at one area or another area. It's not stylized, it's looking at more natural lighting, which is not perfect accurate natural lighting, though it creates interesting enough effect for 72nd. 35th you might be a little more, you can go stylized, or you can go more 100% correct accurate. Now I have got the dark yellow, the base colour, loaded into the airbrush, and just to test it, we've got our two shadow colours there. So it's going to paint across, and you can see that there's a noticeable difference. It's a natural sand colour that I'm quite familiar with tanks and German armour and all sorts of stuff. And you can hear how it's made that spluttering sound, or that really dry hissing. It means the paint's too thick, which is going to add a little more thinner to it. So when you hear that sound, you know that paint's far too dry, far too thick. Jet bubble, just a little extra bit of bonus information, tests. Not as bad, but it's good enough. So yeah, 45-degree angle, and I'm just dusting paint on. trying not to capture any shadowed areas and just colouring it in. I'm going to focus more paint on the top and shade a little less on the sides. Then I'm going to go on the top and just colour in. And you can see that it actually looks a tad different when you lift and you look at the side and when you look at the top. And then we'll load up the other colour and we'll only just paint the tops, and it should be pretty interesting. Got the final paint. Even though there's 2 highlights, I'm only going to use 1 highlight, not too fast. It's pretty bright, pretty light. It actually looks a bit like the box art. Love that colour, and it contrasts heavily with the original shade of dark brown. And literally, we're only just shading from the top. I'm spraying a bit thick, but I'm not too worried. Actually, I might thin that down a bit. There we go, that only took 20 seconds, and you can hear that there's a noticeable difference in the sound of the airbrush. And we're just dusting on. Then I'm going to find some parts that's got solid colours and just colour them in. Top of the reactive armour. Only the top bit of the slope. And bits of the top of the turret, just so there's some interesting contrast. And even though this light's not fantastic, I'll bring the camera down and we'll have a good look. Now the shadowing or shading is very subtle, quite appropriate for the scale, and not just mucking around. There's 101 ways to do it, and when you look down the creases and whatnot, you can see how the colour blends in. So it goes from light to brown. With a bit of inking, I've got some new ink products and some hand painting. This should come out quite nicely. And there you go, that's the look of it. At least we could see it in okay lighting, okay angle, and I'm super happy with that, with it all dry and the panels caught and whatnot. Bit of a wash, bit of a wheel weatherment, and that just looks absolutely Mickey Mouse. I'm really impressed with that. There's multiple ways of shading and trying, and just your choice of the colours, as long as you use the base coat, the shadow. How you use the highlights does not matter whatsoever. So I look forward to the finished review of this particular model. Now we're painting another tank, and I've got this Grundy, it's paper panzer, and it's got these very intricate lines airbrushed all over it. Luckily it's a large tank. I painted it in dark yellow acrylic and then dusted on some tan on top just for a bit of colour variation. Loaded hull red into the airbrush, and we're going to do a test. It's really thin, and we can get a really fine line. I'll zoom in the camera, and it's a bit intimidating to do camouflage like this straight on a painted model, because if you mark up, you mark up. But yeah, we can get the lines pretty small, pretty straight. And the idea is just to be as comfortable as you can and copy the lines as much as you can. And here we go. I'm a bit quiet because it's a bit nerve-wracking, as you can see. So just constantly looking at the reference material. I'm getting a tiny bit of splatter, but It's nothing that's affecting the model too much, and I'm pretty happy with that. We'll see how we go with a few more lines. Paint is heavily thinned down. The PSI is set just right. I've practiced painting a lot of lines, so I know that the airbrush is performing pretty well. And then you just have to keep doing it and get the confidence to do it on the model. If I mess up, I mess up. I'll repaint the whole thing and try again. We'll see how we do once I finish just the brown. So, I'm pretty happy with that. It's an interesting enough pattern. Unfortunately, the reference material only shows, here we go, one angle. So I need to guess the rest and do it in a roughly interesting manner. I've done my research. This tank was never really fielded, never really painted in this colour. There was only a grey version, so the model company or someone dreamed up this colour scheme. I don't know where it came from, so don't have to worry about being too accurate. Though low PSI thin paint is working well, and I'm just going to keep airbrushing. And the idea is the thinner the line, you can sort of go backwards and forwards a few times and colour it in, flesh it out instead of doing it in one pass, because if it's too thick or not right, you can't really shape it. Where if it's really thin, you could really go out all out and just really control it. Like that. And that's working quite nicely. We'll have a look at it when it's done. So, we've done that. It looks pretty cool. I'm super happy with that. I bit the bullet. You do need a bit of concentration, as you notice it went quiet. Just mucking around. Now, just before we pack up, we've got a gun cannon. We've got two detailed in shell holes, as well as vents. So we're going to detail them nicely with some black paint. I've got matte black paint in my airbrush. Pretty heavily thinned down, and it sort of goes on quite translucent. Very tight spot. What we're going to do is we're just going to colour in these shell holes a bit. Like that. There we go. And all it is just a tiny bit of black paint dusted on with the vents on the back. We're just going to colouring them in tiny. So you sort of just colour them in, you warm them up, you make them, you know, slightly darkish, and then you go right in the middle. And then you just make it quite black. And there you go. From a distance, it looks pretty cool. And it's just a tiny bit of blackening around the gun cannon. And it just looks a bit interesting. Just tiny bits of detail that you can do to just brighten up and make a model more interesting. A little bit of a wash, a little bit of weathering, a little bit of dry brushing, and it gives it maximum interest and detail. The tip of the gun barrel, as per the reference material, I painted it gunmetal, hand painted very quickly so I could dust on the paint, don't have to worry about it. And once it dries up a bit, I can paint up the tracks, matte coat it, wash it. She's ready for a dull coat. Did a lot of modelling between now and late November. The airbrush is well and truly buggered and stuffed. Really struggling, spluttering a bit. So we're going to give her a really good clean out, regular maintenance to the compressor, such as purging all the water out of the tank and whatnot. This will have a good ultrasonic clean and a lube, and we'll do some lines. all the usual maintenance tips as usual from the other videos. We probably talked a lot about paint, so we'll probably save more maintenance-y stuff for next month. So it's all clean, it's all rigged up, it's very smooth, it's absolutely beautiful, and it's working the first time round. Now the issue is the washer that goes actually here, not here, under the solenoid is wearing out and falling apart. It does not seem to have any effect on the airbrush or any link or any air leaking. I have a few spares and I could buy a spare for about $2 to $4. I'm going to see when it falls out or wears out or whatever, what happens, if there's any major effect. So it'll be an interesting experiment. The trigger down on the solenoid is a bit stiff, but that's usual for putting petroleum jelly or Vaseline on the inside. Sometimes it just completely blocks. It didn't this time, so I think I've got the right mixture down pat. I'm going to work it a bit, put some paint some lines. How you guys going? So this is the conclusion to the December-January honing your airbrush skills, which is spilling into February. So it's 2 and a bit months, probably close to 2.5 months. The airbrush really struggled with the Barbaros and the last few tanks that I was producing. It was just gunking up, and I was pulling out all sorts of crap and whatnot as I went. A good clean out has really improved it dramatically. I just need to not get lazy and be a bit more disciplined. I've done my lines. They came out quite beautifully. Very, very close. There is a tiny bit of a fuzz, a tiny bit of, I wouldn't say a splatter, it's a fuzz. I was trying to go for a hard edge over a soft edge. Absorbs in the paper, that's completely understandable, but the lines are quite nice. The airbrush is working beautifully. I've clogged the rear O-ring with petroleum jelly. It did seem to leak a bit during the Barbaros build, but eventually it reclogged itself up with dried paint, so that's not a problem. The bottom washer I'm interested in. The nozzle and needle is a few months old, not too bad. I think I did kind of break the tip off the needle throughout the month and kind of unhooked it with the knife, which I showed a few videos ago. If you bend your needle, you just try to straighten it out for knife, and you just rotate the knife while guiding the blade down the tip until it hooks something, and it either straightens it out or cuts it off. Probably run it a bit of sandpaper, and even though the temper is quite short and you're not going to get as much gradient out of it, it is still going to work in that nozzle until it's sanded down so far it's not usable. As always, when I talk in these videos, this is a bit of a disclaimer. These are not tutorials. These are just sort of me experimenting, furthering my skills and knowledge in airbrushing and sharing it with everybody. This is a game that everyone else can play at home. Even if you're not cleaning out your airbrush every month, at least just pull it out once a month, load a little paint, and you just get used to just loading, thinning paint, spraying and cleaning it up. If you're not too knowledgeable or only been doing airbrushing for a few years, it's all in confidence, not in skill. Skill can be learnt and earned very, very quickly, and it's just a lot of fun. So the more times you pick up and use your airbrush, even if it's just to pass paint through it for shits and giggles, it's building up that confidence. It's putting more experience in your hands. Again, if you're really, really new, disassemble and reassemble as often as possible. If something's wrong, you pull the paint out immediately and pull apart and check what's going on. Give it a very, very quick strip and clean. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, until next time, the 0.5mm airbrush was a bit of a bummer, though it's going to be fine for primering and large terrains. Probably the next video I will review and play around with the 0.3mm Hseng Chinese Sparmax bootleg. They're not too bad. I use them quite frequently when I'm not airbrushing here. I'm at a club meet or someone else's place or whatever. pull it out from time to time when it's well greased and well maintained. Using advice from this video, it works out quite nicely. Catch you guys later, and until next time.